content warning. This podcast contains a brief discussion on sensitive topics that may be triggering to some listeners. If you are struggling with depression and thoughts of self-harm and you live in the U.S., you can dial 988 for the Universal Lifeline, which gives free and confidential help 24 hours a day. If you would like to skip this portion of our podcast, it comes toward the end of our history and facts section. Thank you. And now on to the show. Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV of the 80s and 90s and ask the question,
does this hold up, or did I just ruin my childhood?
My name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
Welcome back, everybody. We have been away for a while.
We have.
But we put out our lost episode last time, and today we're looking at
Superman the movie.
Because Steve said, I feel like watching Superman, and I said, only if we do it for the podcast.
From 1978.
1978, yeah. And before we get into that,
it's a good start back.
I think so.
You know, should I have said sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical, sometimes unscheduled look back at pop culture?
Maybe. We haven't been like the best about scheduling stuff, but listen, I think everybody can relate to this. Sometimes, you know, your life changes for a bit, and we both took on second jobs, and we had to kind of focus on work for a little while.
Just so you guys know, I've been chomping at the bit, and Megan's like, no.
We're not. That is not accurate at all. All right, so it's back to school time as well.
It is, and that brings up our non-sponsored snack.
Yes, Lunchables.
Lunchables.
Steve, did you have Lunchables as a kid?
I did have Lunchables. Well, I don't recall probably teen years. I don't know when they started. So I would imagine probably in my teen years I remember Lunchables. I ate Lunchables as an adult quite a bit as well.
Really?
Yeah, I dig Lunchables.
I have never had a Lunchables.
What?
Yeah.
You're munching on them. And I'm going to just so everyone knows out there, I went with a classic. Okay, the ham and cheese Lunchable is like the original classic Lunchable.
Let me ask you this, Steve. Do I have celiacs? Can I have crackers? I cannot have crackers. I'm not going to buy the ham and cheese one.
Megan, that's just an excuse.
No, it's not an excuse.
Right.
Dude, I'm going to be honest with you. These are from Kraft. I really shouldn't be eating any of it. Because Kraft is very notorious for, like, let's put everything on one conveyor belt, and a lot of times it has flour on there.
I went with the ham and cheese classic that comes with chocolate chip cookies and fruit punch Capri Sun. Mm-hmm. Megan went with nachos, which is some kind of new age revisited Lunchable that I've never seen.
Because I can't have the crackers.
Megan, if you loved this podcast, you'd be willing to die for it.
I don't think that's accurate. Hang on one second.
I got a Lunchable stack here in my hand, so I'm waiting for you to talk so I can munch down.
So Steve's gonna get my straw for me, and I'll probably edit this out. There we go.
That I just did the classic Capri Sun move where you just whack it on the table and it pops up.
We had Capri Sun before for one of our other shows.
We did,
and I did it again. Good. Okay, I didn't get it all over. So I was listening to a different podcast, and it has a guy from New Zealand on there. And he had never heard of Lunchables before. So I don't know if this is like American-Canadian thing. Sometimes to New Zealand, Australia, they have to ship stuff. So a lot of times they don't ship everything over there. But if you haven't had Lunchables before, they're a little small, almost like a bento box tray. And Steve, as he said, has ham, cheese, crackers. So it's like little small, like 50-cent piece size ham, right? And you've got two cookies and you've got a Capri Sun. So Lunchables started in 1988 in Seattle. And then they were released nationally in 1989.
Okay, so I would have been 12. I would have been an adolescent.
Yeah, by that point, in school, like in my school, it wasn't. In middle school and high school, it's like not cool to bring your lunch. In some places it is, and in some places it isn't.
It was not where I grew up.
So I wasn't really bringing my lunch. I also kind of felt like, and I will bleep this, like, just give me a f***ing sandwich. Why?
Whoa.
What's up with this cracker nonsense?
Whoa! See what happens? We spend too much time away, and Megan starts dropping F-bombs. I don't like that at all.
There's like, it's like little, like, I don't want a cracker with some cheese on it. Like, if I'm going to have a sandwich, I want
Watch your mouth. This is... I actually ate more of these in my 20s and actually 30s than I did as a kid.
Why?
When I was a teacher, I would bring these for lunch sometimes.
Steve.
Yeah, there are students of mine, high school students, that will verify that I would eat these in my classroom for lunch.
I have little tiny, like, nickel-sized nachos that are so small. And cheese, like the kind of cheese you get for nachos.
Mm-hmm.
And then a salsa that is a little too sour for me. And a Kit Kat that I can't have, but you can. So that's good for you. Guess why they started Lunchables? It was under the Oscar Mayer brand.
Because they wanted to up sales of deli meat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because parents were being a little more health conscious, and bologna in particular was not as popular.
Is there a bologna Lunchable? Because I've never had... I don't think I've ever had the bologna one. I've had the ham and the turkey.
I tried to get you the bologna one, but... here's kind of a fun fact. They did not have this way when we were kids. I think this is a newer thing. Mm-hmm. They have all different sizes of Lunchables.
Yeah, they have little ones with no drink. That's for suckers, though. Yeah, if you don't get a Capri Sun in your Lunchable.
They have a little one that has no drink and no... like dessert.
Yeah.
And it's just like the cheese and crackers or whatever. And then they have a medium size that has no drink. And then they have this size with the drink. And then they had a bigger one in addition, but I couldn't.
There's a bigger Lunchable?
Yeah, but these were like $7. See, this is the other reason I would never have gotten these, because my parents were going to be like, basically when you measure it all out, a ham and cheese sandwich costs like $1.50 to make.
Right.
They're not going to buy like a $4 Lunchables.
Well, yeah, these were a lot cheaper back. You're now buying Lunchables in inflation. But,
yeah, that's true.
But they were much. I remember they were maybe like $2.50, $2.53, which I don't remember. What maybe was when by the time I was in middle school, high school. I don't remember how much high school lunch was. Maybe $2. I don't remember. Yeah, it wasn't a lot. You know,
mine was like $1.25,
$1.50 by high school time. Yeah, really?
I don't know. I don't remember. I didn't go to lunch because I didn't really have many friends, so I joined yearbook.
But you didn't eat lunch at all?
No.
That's crazy.
No. I did 1 year, and then I joined, like, I was part of, like, 15 different clubs. So I didn't go to study hall either.
Wow. Those were the best 2 periods of the day.
No.
Study hall and lunch.
If you're a nerd and you're really unpopular, those are really the worst parts of your day.
I'm sorry, sweetie.
It's okay.
I was a nerd, but I loved those.
I was a nerd, but I had friends. That's you.
Oh, thanks.
So at any rate, the little plastic tray is supposed to be kind of like frozen food.
Yeah.
Like a frozen dinner. And the brand has kind of shifted a bit. So at one point they had hot dogs and hamburgers, like little sliders.
I remember them trying to push that. Yeah, I didn't buy that.
They have, which I didn't get because I didn't think that you'd like it. Do you like the pizza ones?
I don't know that I've ever had the pizza ones.
It looks gross. It's like almost like uncooked dough.
Yeah,
or like barely cooked dough.
I'm a Lunchable traditionalist.
Yeah.
I want processed meat, cheese, and cracker. You know? And like I said, I never tried the mini hamburgers or hot dogs, which is surprising because you as my wife know my love of mini wieners. I love cocktail wieners, so it surprises me that I never tried the hot dogs.
But we don't know how much I love a good wiener.
A mini wiener, I said.
Just a mini, not a big one. Okay, so getting back to it, the head of Lunchables said it's been that fun lunch. I think that's what kept it evergreen, because even since it came out in 1989 nationwide, it really dominated the market for combination lunches that you can buy. It has about 90% of the market share.
Okay.
So, like, other things, like, here and there, probably healthier ones with, like, organic meat or whole grain crackers or whatever. They also had at different points around the world with Asian-style barbecue chicken, Mexican-style chicken tacos. They tried to do healthier options like yogurt instead of like candy or cookies, apple slices and carrots, but then nobody bought them.
Yeah, that's like when McDonald's tried that.
Yeah, listen, this is like you're not going for health here. If you want an apple,
no, you're going for quick and easy.
Yeah. So, I don't love this, and this is probably why I didn't get it. But again, I don't have the cool cheese and crackers because I knew I couldn't eat it.
That's true. So let's rate it.
Okay.
Okay, out of lunch boxes.
Okay.
All right.
That doesn't go with Superman. That's fine.
And for those of you who've never listened to us, first off, you have a lot of back episodes to listen to.
Listen, there's like 56 or 57 back episodes.
But secondly, we always do the snack out of 5 and the show, cartoon, or movie out of 10.
Yep.
So out of lunch boxes, Megan, how many lunch boxes out of 5 do you give Lunchables?
I like the idea. I mean, it's not healthy for kids. I wouldn't, if we had kids, I would get them this like once a week. Like this is a Friday treat.
It's like a treat.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fun. I think if I could eat it, I would probably buy it for myself for lunch. I probably would. I can't really eat anything that's in there, so it's hard for me to rate it. I don't love, the nachos are a little too thick, and they're kind of gross. And that, so for me, this is like out of a 5, I give it a 3. But again, that's very biased, right? Because I have food allergies. I like the Capri Sun.
I'm giving it a 5.
All right.
Because I love Lunchables, and now also I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is the medium-sized box or whatever you called it.
Yeah.
And so I got like 5 stacks of meat, cheese, and cracker. I got cookies. I got a drink, a full Capri Sun. Like, I feel like I could eat this and be, like, satisfied for lunch. And it's only 320 calories.
Which, again, right, for an adult, that's a proper amount for lunch.
Yeah.
For a kid...
Well, you have like a Whopper or something, it's like 600 calories.
Right. For a kid, I just think that it's a lot. I mean,
I would
wrong.
be interested to know how much a school lunch is in calories.
Yeah, that's true. And it also depends where you go to school, right? Because some schools have enough money to have really great lunch programs, and other schools are getting... I heard this on a thing the other day, or I was reading it, that schools right now are still getting like, I think it's $1.80 per meal per kid. Okay. And some of them have to, because if they're in impoverished areas, they have to do breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
So their budget is super stretched, and they're just like glopping things, and they try their best, But I mean, my school lunches in kindergarten were amazing, and like K through 5. When I bought lunch,
right,
they were really, really good. But it was a smaller school, and that was before like the budget cuts came. By the time I got to high school, one of the reasons I didn't eat lunch was because it's like a greasy piece of gross pizza. Like, it's not. And they'll be like, here's a salad, and it's wilted lettuce with like a quarter of a tomato on top, Yeah.
The pizza, I mean, everybody always, remembers the pizza. But pizza was not bad for my school. But you know what the best thing was? Chicken sandwich. My school had like a breaded chicken patty sandwich. Awesome.
My elementary school, once a month, they'd give a calendar of what they were doing. And once a month, they'd do a grilled peanut butter and jelly. Stop the presses.
Really?
It was so good. It was so good. Because it's like, think of a grilled cheese, but like peanut butter and strawberry jelly oozing out and like buttery grilled fried bread.
That's true.
Oh, man. All right. So...
Yeah!
4 out of 5 lunch boxes. Well, so that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
All right. Can you give us just a very brief overview of Superman the movie, the 1978 version?
Sure. So, the 1978 version of Superman the movie is basically an origin story. It starts off with Superman as a baby on Krypton, the destruction of Krypton, him coming to Earth, him being raised by the Kents in Kansas, and then basically him finding the crystals with information, so he learns about his past, and then it goes into him in Metropolis, the beginning of him as Clark Kent the reporter, and meeting Lois Lane, Perry White, all of the normal characters that we know from in Superman comics and in cartoons and things like that. And then, of course, battling Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor has plans to basically take over the world, or, take over at least the East Coast or the West Coast of the United States, right? And so he has to battle Lex Luthor, and then, of course, he wins in the end. But it's a 2-hour movie.
It was 2.5.
2.5. There's a lot in it.
Yeah.
And it does cover quite a bit. So by the end, you've basically had the origin of Superman, him growing up, and then him getting his job, becoming Superman, and doing normal Superman things.
Normal Superman
Yeah,
things.
saving people. Saving the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and we get in there, and we'll get into this in our full review and recap, but in those normal Superman things, we get a lot of, like, famous shots that were, like, in the comics, right? So, like, the first comic, I know you're going to talk about the comics in a minute, but the first comic had him, like, holding up a car.
Yes.
On the cover, and he does that in the movie.
Yeah.
So, and we have him, like, the famous, like, symbol of hope with the S.
Yep.
How he gets, like, all of those things.
Yes.
Right? So, tell us a little bit about the comic, because I know you're more into the origins in the comics than I am.
Sure. Well, the comics were started in 1938, and he was started actually in Action Comics, I believe, and then started in his own title of Superman. It was started by Simon and Schuster.
Oh, okay.
And they began to actually write Superman comics, and then they sold the rights to DC. They sold the rights, but then stayed on as writers.
Okay.
And so while they made a decent wage as writers, and they made some good money writing Superman for over 10 years, right? They sold the rights to Superman for $130. And when it took off, and they came back to DC and was like, listen, we should get some more money for this. DC was like, it's not really worth it for our company. So we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And so in the mid-40s, Simon & Schuster decided to try to push a lawsuit against DC to get more money, and DC fired them in 1947.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't make a whole lot of money off of it.
It's surprising to me that this didn't start with DC, because when you say DC Comics, I think Batman, Superman.
Right. Well, I mean, you're talking 30s and 40s still.
Yeah.
Right? By 39, they were actually, DC was covering it.
Yeah.
So it was very early on.
I want to find out what $130 in today's money would be.
It doesn't sound like much.
Yeah, that's about $2,800 today. So still not
a lot.
No, still not a lot.
Yeah, if you're like, I sold a comic book character that's going to be used for, 80
decades.
Years.
Yeah.
For $2,000, people would be like, you got ripped off. The interesting thing is, too, is we know Superman today is this huge hero, but Superman was actually originally a villain.
Oh, okay.
The first story
in
Simon
the Action Comics?
No, the first story Simon Schuster wrote with him originally was back in, I think, 1933. So it was a number of years before Superman, and it was called The Reign of the Superman, and it was about this mad scientist who pulls a guy off a food line. Because, of course, it's during the Depression.
Right.
Pulls a guy off a food line and gives him telekinetic powers. And the guy goes kind of crazy with the powers and starts, like, taking over the city and things like that. And then finally, at the end, he kind of, like, comes about his senses and the powers wear off. But he's basically a villain because he's, like, got too much power and he's gone through all this stuff in the Depression. After they did that story, a few years later, as they were kind of looking for something to pitch and to do, they retooled it. They made him an alien. They gave him the cape and the soup, and they gave him super strength and speed and things like that.
But you know how, like, they redid Batman to be that detective movie with, was it Robert Pattinson that did that one?
Yes.
They should do The Reign of Superman. Because I think that some of the ones recently, like, they're too light. There's not enough tension. Like, because he's not a flawed... Like, nowadays, we kind of like our heroes flawed and our villains a little sympathetic.
This is the issue, though, is that Batman can be flawed, right? Batman's also a person. He's a human.
Yeah.
Right? Batman tends to have a lot of flaws because he went through a traumatic past, right? Superman's a Boy Scout. He was raised by a... I know his planet blew up, but he was a little kid. Since the time he remembers, he was raised by a mom and a dad in a Midwestern town in Kansas.
That's true.
Right? They gave him this great life. He fights for truth, justice, the American way.
Yeah.
Right? He just... Everything he does everything in a good way, basically.
Okay. I guess. I'm just saying, I would watch that movie.
Superman preceded Batman just by a little bit.
Superman
got his own run in 1938 with Superman #1. And not long after that, Batman debuted in Detective Comics #27.
Okay.
And Batman still runs in Detective Comics, which is in the hundreds. I think 400 or 500. I think they're over 500 now.
Does Superman still run?
Yeah, but he has his own title and things like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the actual movie. I know it's 1978, but we watched this as kids in the 80s. And I'm actually, we'll talk about this with our memories, but I don't think I've ever seen this full version. Especially not the 2.5 hour one.
No,
Because I saw it on like TBS and sometimes in pieces.
Yep, that makes sense.
It's also how I saw Star Wars, which is really not the way you want to see
No.
Star Wars. So, Steve, okay, listen. I did a lot of research for today, okay? And this movie, the history of this movie is crazy banana times to me.
Okay.
So these two guys who have no connection to Warner Brothers, who at that point owned the rights to, like, filming Superman.
Yeah.
Because they've done other, like, shorts and black and white stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And they had the older TV show. So they have no connection to them. But they want to make a Superman movie. Like, basically, they're just these two producers, Ilya and Alexander Salkind. And they get the idea to make a film. So they kind of cobble the financing together a little bit. But they don't have a distributor. They don't really... I mean, they're kind of a small production team.
Yes.
But not a full company, right? So what they have... I've never heard of this before... U.S. distribution rights under what's known as a negative pickup deal. So that means that the studio didn't have to help fund the movie.
Oh.
They were just going to distribute it, and then they'd get a cut for distribution.
Okay.
And so what these two guys do, basically, eventually, it ends up being the most expensive movie made to that point.
Yeah.
So they needed money from Warner Brothers. They kept asking for money and the production kept getting delayed. The other thing is, the Godfather movie, not too long before this, part 1 and part 2.
Yes.
Based on a book by a writer named Mario Puzo.
Right.
Pretty famously, like... There's a whole TV show about the making of The Godfather.
Right.
Remember we watched? And pretty famously, Mario Puzo, like, is not a scriptwriter. He's a book writer.
Right.
Right? And he, like, embellishes his stuff. But one of these guys really likes The Godfather. And they're like, you know who should write that Superman movie? Mario Puzo. So they hire him, and he delivers. I'm trying not to laugh through this because I find this hysterical. He delivers to them a 500-page script.
Wow.
So here's the thing: if you don't know anything about movies, a page in a script is about a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. 500 pages is like an epic. Like 2 hours would be 120. 4 hours would be 240.
It would be over 8. It would be over 8 hours.
Yeah, we're talking about basically like the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. Right? So then they're like, they look at it, and the director that they bring on loves Superman, and he's like, this guy is ruining Superman. So then to bring on more people, and they fix up and they kind of doctor the script. So if you watch the movie, which by the way is on HBO,
yep,
because they own all of DC stuff right now.
Max.
HBO, yeah, sorry, Max.
Yeah.
if you watch it on Max, you watch the credits, Steve goes, that's a lot of writers. The credits. Yeah, there's like 5 people who ended up working on this script.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like that same thing kind of happened with Gone with the Wind. Like it was from a very large book. Same thing with Superman. It's got a lot of lore behind it, right?
Right.
So they have to kind of put a lot into it. So what they basically decided to do, kind of like Lord of the Rings that I just mentioned, they always intended on having this be Superman and then Superman Part 2.
Yeah.
That was always the intention. And so they basically filmed a lot of the stuff at the same time. And then when they distributed it, they had a little bit still left to shoot for Part 2, but most of it was already shot. Gotcha. Which I think is just because you're talking about 1978, like Star Wars initially, it wasn't set up that way, right? Eventually they had the other parts of the series, but very few things at that time were shot like sequentially.
Almost not at all.
And even now, you think like I can name a couple of things, The Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, but those are like also things where there's multiple books, right? So, at any rate, then one of the first people that they hire is Marlon Brando.
Yes.
Where was he in the billing, Steve?
He was top.
Yeah.
He had billing above Christopher Reeve, and Marlon Brando is not in almost any. He's in a very small amount of the movie.
Yeah. Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman get billing above Christopher Reeve. Yeah. Christopher Reeve was kind of an unknown at the time. They actually didn't even want to cast him because he was very thin, and they didn't think he was muscular enough. But he had been working on Broadway and doing theater acting. And he said, look, I used to be a jock, like before I started acting on Broadway, I had to lose weight. And probably, I don't know if he was tap dancing or whatever. I don't know if he was in those kind of plays. But he gained like 50 pounds of muscle for this film.
Gotcha.
But he was pretty much unknown. Marlon, they always had in mind and notoriously difficult to work with.
Oh, yeah.
At one point, the guy came up to the director, one of the producers, and was like, listen, here's the thing about Brando. He's going to try to do the bare minimum. Like, if he can just read his lines off screen, he will. And the director's like, wait, what? And then Marlon Brando walks up to him, and he's like, I think that the aliens should be bagels. The director's like, what? He goes, listen, nobody knows what these aliens look like. Just put a bagel out there and like put some shiny stuff on the bagel and I'll talk off screen. He was not going to ever like play this unless he got top billing. He got $4 million for the part.
Wow.
Which is a massive amount, especially in 1978. Yeah. So like I said, they really wanted an unknown, which is why they got Christopher Reeve. And then we had our leading lady of Margot Kidder. And, both of these people have passed, which is sad. She really struggled with mental health stuff, but she was also like an activist for a while.
Yeah.
But she got this part because they just wanted somebody who would just be themselves. And she comes in, and apparently she didn't have her contact lenses in. And the director was like, oh, I just fell in love with her. Like, she was just so clumsy. And she she also was willing to fly into London to test with Christopher Reeve, which a lot of the other actresses who had bigger names were like, no.
Right.
Right? So basically, he then makes her film the whole thing with no contacts in. Because he wants her to be and very wide-eyed, because when she couldn't see, she'd open her eyes wider. Which I think is kind of funny, but also imagine doing this whole movie and there eventually are 4 of them and you're blind as a bat and everything is blurry the whole time.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's kind of funny. The Krypton costumes couldn't be really touched. The glowing energy look to them was out of glass. So people had to sense. Touch them with gloves and like try not to break it.
Because they're white. Yeah. But they really do glow with the camera.
Yeah.
They look almost like phosphorus.
And I just figured it was like a lens effect, but apparently no, it was like the lighting, but with like all these little glass balls and stuff. And then my last fun fact is that how were they going to get him to fly? They didn't want to do the same techniques used in the series because they thought it would look too fake.
Yeah.
And they wanted to feel more authentic. So basically, they designed a system with 2 zoom lenses interacting with each other. He was in one case on a pole arm, which you don't see. And he makes moves, and then the camera and the projector make him look like he's going straight up in the air.
Okay, gotcha.
And I think then the other ones where, like, he's flying with Lois, my guess would be that they're on some kind of, maybe they've got wires or harnesses. Okay. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that they tried to come up with some different special effects. And I have one last fun fact, but we're going to save it till when we get to that part in the movie.
Okay. So, I have a somber fact.
Oh, no.
Okay, so
I don't like it.
One of the things about Superman and around this whole title and this character was people have always kind of said there was almost like a curse around it, right? Mm-hmm. George Reeves, who played the original Superman, he was sort of typecast as Superman, which he didn't care for, and had trouble getting work after that, and was later found he was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Then, of course, we know Christopher Reeves had an accident riding a horse and ended up in a wheelchair and paralyzed. And then, of course, the baby that played Superman in the movie when he was in Krypton, and they sent him away, died at 14.
Oh, jeez.
From huffing solvents.
Steve, I'm not going to air this part. So depressing. And Margot Kidder had a really sad death, too. I don't want to get into it, but it was also...
that is like a...
Yeah, I don't like it. It makes me sad, and this is a fun podcast. Here's a good fact. The kid who played Superman as a teenager still is acting. He's like a working actor. He does like voiceover stuff, so he's good. But yeah, if you ever see the movie Hollywoodland with Ben Affleck, he plays George Reeves in that.
Yes.
And kind of, I think, really, I'm not a super Ben Affleck fan, but I always thought he did a great job in that movie, just showing the anguish of somebody struggling with depression and a career that's flagging, and they're trying to do everything to revive it, you know?
Gotcha.
So, on that somber note, we will take our break.
Yep.
You guys don't really have a break, but we're going to take a break for a minute. And when we come back, we're going to talk about our memories about the film, and then we'll get into our full review and recap. All right, we're back.
I'm Steve.
I'm still Megan. And we're talking about Superman, 1978.
So, memories of Superman. What were your childhood memories of Superman?
Yeah, my memories of Superman are really more about Lois and Clark that we're going to talk about next time.
That's not your childhood.
Well, yeah, teenage years.
Yeah,
really,
I guess, but yeah.
High school and
Did you not remember this at all? Well, I guess, yeah, you would have been really young still.
Obviously, I would not have seen this when this came out because it was a year before I was born. But my memories of this are just, you know what? Yes, okay. The guy in my elementary school that I had a crush on, obsessed with Superman, and would a couple of Halloweens dressed up like him.
Okay. I
remember that. And I think a lot of people had that as like their go-to Halloween costume.
Yes.
And also I did see, like I said, pieces of this movie. My Christopher Reeve movie that I really love is Somewhere in Time. This movie, I liked it. I just remember, it would be on TBS like a lot. And so we'd see pieces here and there. But I think because of the age of it, possibly because of the length, and maybe because it's not really like technically a kid's movie, we just never, like, I didn't have it on VHS. I didn't, like, you know what I mean? Some of the other ones we've talked about, like Splash, I watched it all the time.
Yes.
But what I was going to say is when they had in the comics, when Superman died, and they brought him back.
Yep.
But when Superman died, the kid that I had a crush on wore a black armband for a week with the Superman
He was
insignia.
hardcore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was like too shy to ever talk to him hardly. in like middle school, and I finally was like, "What's that for?" And he was like, "Superman died." And he looked at me like I was an idiot.
Yeah, I remember that.
I didn't care for that.
And it wasn't even the worst thing they did to him, because then when they brought him back, he had a mullet.
Oh, that's horrible. That's the real death.
That's the real tragedy there.
Yeah, so I think it's more like, yeah, a lot of the kids would sometimes play like superhero games and they'd wear capes, and I never knew anybody who tried to like jump off their balcony or their roof or anything, yeah. But I know some kids did that. So what are your memories?
I mean, I was obviously very, very young as well when this came out originally, but I recall I actually spent more Halloweens as Batman.
Okay.
But Superman was the first superhero I dressed up as for Halloween. And it's really the earliest Halloween I remember. I was probably 3.
Aww.
And I went as Superman. And so that was probably off the first movie.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
You know, it would have been before the second Superman came out. And so, yeah, it was definitely, I recall that. And I remember, of course, watching Superman. I remember watching cartoons. I remember I was a big comic book fan. So, I was always more a bit of a Marvel fan than DC. But I did collect, like I said, I collected around the time that Superman died. I remember that. And so there was a lot of that involved. I liked Superman because I liked the fact that he was, as I mentioned before, kind of a Boy Scout. So he always tries to do the right thing. He's not going to kill somebody. He's not that kind of thing. That's
why I was going to say I'm surprised you dressed up more as Batman, because you seem more like a Superman guy.
Yeah, but when I was like 11 or 12, Batman, the movie came out.
That's true.
So I spent a lot of like middle school. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was dark and gritty. Michael Keaton.
Yeah. And then by the second one, it was a little more campy. And then by the third one, it was just ridiculous.
Yes.
So let's get into our recap. So this is, like we said, a super long movie.
It really was. So there was kind of pieces to it.
Yeah. So what's the first piece?
So the first piece is the beginning of the movie on Krypton. And I'm going to be honest, I feel like they spent way too much time at the beginning of the movie on Krypton. I think they could have cut a lot of that and still had a good movie. Maybe it was Marlon Brando and they feel like we got to pay this guy $4 million, so we're going to put him in at least a few different scenes.
Yeah, there are two things about this. One that I forgot to mention. The first is that I don't know what version we watched, because they had a version where they added footage so that it could run on TV like a mini-series.
Oh, okay.
Where they showed it over 2 nights, like 3 hours each.
Oh.
Because of commercials.
Yeah.
Right? So I suspect that I did not know that this movie is 2.5 hours. It would not surprise me if we watched the one with the extra footage.
Possibly, yeah.
Having said that, I think that in terms of storytelling, today what we would do, if you knew that you were doing part 1, part 2, you would have some of that footage in part 2. Yeah. As like a flashback.
It's a flashback or him learning more about it. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. It kind of went on for a bit.
There was it was talking about like politics, kind of like Kryptonian politics. There was the scene where, of course, like he's doing, he's judging Zod and his 2 people who you see in Superman 2, of course.
Right.
Right. But again, in Superman 2, they explain where they came from, so you don't necessarily need that.
And also, they don't show up again for this whole movie.
No, they come back in Superman 2.
Yeah, they have nothing to do with this entire movie. So I could see like sitting through this and then just being like, "Wait, what about those guys at the beginning? Yeah. What was that all about?" Having said that, what'd you think of the look of it?
The look was neat. As we said before, like you mentioned to us for facts, they put like glass on the costumes. So it was meant, obviously, they mentioned in that piece at one point, the woman who plays Superman's mom mentions that they're supposed to be like 1,000 years more advanced than Earth. Right. So everything's made to look sleek.
Yeah.
And clean. Their outfits are all white or black, depending on... They're white when they're talking about science and doing things, but they're black
when
during
they're
a trial.
Politics, yeah.
And then everyone has their own house emblem, which was interesting because a lot of times when Superman first debuted, he had the S on his chest, of course, which for Superman. But through Superman lore, between then and, of course, when this movie comes out, it had actually become a thing that was actually, it's not actually an S. Mm-hmm. It's actually the symbol for the House of L, which is his family's crest, which actually means hope in Kryptonian.
And I did like that you could see all of the other people had badges for the politicians.
They had different symbols.
They have different symbols. I will mention, too, that before this, they have a weird tag at the beginning where it's like, in 1938, in Metropolis, the Daily Planet was the best paper around. And then for a little bit of the movie, we're like, does this take place in 1938?
But it doesn't. Then they jump. I think it's just, as we mentioned, I think that was just a nod to the comic book.
I also think that if you're coming in, even if you like superheroes, they knew that this movie was going to be big.
Yes.
You're going to have a lot of people who don't usually go for fantasy stuff. And this is, to me, a little bit like Wizard of Oz, where they have a thing at the beginning to put you in the real world.
Yes.
Because we don't get back to the newspaper part of it for like a half hour.
I was going to say that. We actually, and this is the thing, I feel like they spent too much time in Krypton.
Yeah.
I also feel like they spent too much time in Kansas.
Okay.
Because it's a third of the way through the movie at least before we even see Christopher Reeve.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't show up till Clark Kent is like 30. Right? And so there's a lot of time spent with him, that again they could have, I think, shortened a little bit.
Yeah. I did think though that the planet looked cool. I think it looks like really like crags. It looks almost like a frozen planet, but it sort of looked like a computer chip. A lot of times one of the things we ask on this show is, does it hold up? And to me, sometimes the lo-fi special effects hold up better than CG.
So there was a lot of model work in this.
Yeah. If you had it all,
it was well done.
But when you have things that are all CG, you can tell when something, you're like, oh, that looks like 2001.
Yeah.
Because of the computer technology advancements. And then sometimes they put too much in there, and I think they would have messed it up. So I think the model work was kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's something that I enjoyed. So let's talk about Kansas, because there were a few things here that I was like, what? In my notes.
So Krypton is going to explode. So Marlon Brando, his dad, they put him as an infant in a spaceship, and they shoot him off to Earth.
And it takes him 3 years.
And basically. It takes 3 years because when he shows up, he is probably around, I would say, probably 3 years old, somewhere in that area. 2 or 3, like a late toddler.
And Ma and Pa Kent, Martha and Jonathan find him. And this part to me was very poignant because she says to him, we've been praying for babies for so long and it never happened. And you can tell they're kind of older.
Yes.
They're like in their 50s. And they're like, and now, and he goes, well, Martha, we got to do the right thing and take him back. And then he lifts up the back of their car.
Yeah.
So to help them with the fire, right? So they kind of very quickly realize that that's not good. They have nowhere to take him to. But, it's just a really poignant little moment between the two of them. But then we also see Clark as a
teenager,
a teenager. Yeah, they also have this really cool detail that he says to her, Martha Clark Kent. So that's her maiden name, and that's where they gave him his name, which I thought was kind of nice.
Yeah, that made sense.
But they have this whole thing where he's a teenager and he's kind of like a nerd a little bit because they don't want him to show his powers.
Right.
They've said to him, like, they're going to test you and they're going to and then you'll never be a normal person.
Yeah.
And they have a little thing where he talks to Lana, who's this random redheaded girl.
Yeah, Lana
Lang. Which, if you don't know the comics, you don't know who that is.
That was his high school crush.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is, for me, I kind of knew that, like, just knowing a little bit, they do Lana Lang in the show Smallville, right?
Yeah. All the girls Superman was into had LL initials.
Yeah.
And so did Lex Luthor, who was his... Oh. There was other people that weren't just, like, girls he was into. But there was a lot of LL initials in the Superman lore, for some reason.
Why? We don't know.
We don't know. There just is.
We'll look it up for next time. So what did you... So you thought that part was too long of him, like, running next to the train, which they also did in Smallville.
I mean, it's great. Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting. There's good effects that they do. Right? He gets angry and throws the football way into space.
Right.
Right? He's running faster than the train and all this other stuff. So they do a lot of things that show that he's frustrated.
Yeah.
That everyone thinks he's a joke and kind of a wimp, but he's more powerful than anyone, right?
Yeah.
And so that you can tell that. But I feel like, again, if you really want to know a lot about that part of his life, watch Smallville.
Yeah.
Right? It's 7 or 8 seasons or something, right, of that part of his life before he becomes Superman.
And you can see, what's her name before she became a cult leader?
Oh, yeah, Ally Mack.
Ally Mack. So the thing is, then we get to the part that I thought was the weakest part of the movie. So he finds these crystals that came down to earth with him. First he has a heart-to-heart with Jonathan. Then Jonathan dies.
Yeah, he has a heart attack.
But you can run and fly. Like, just go and get the doctor, man. Or run him to the hospital or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can't save everybody.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
And this is the 60s, you know, not as good medicine.
Well, that's true.
In Smallville, Kansas.
Yeah. They do pull out to show that there's nothing around them, right? There's just... So at any rate, his father dies and he says to his mom, well, I gotta go and look at these crystals.
Yeah, I gotta take off and find myself.
Then they have this weird talking head where Jor-El Brando talks to him through like a hologram.
Yes.
Basically. And he says, I'm training you these 12 years until you become a full man. What?
Yeah.
And I wrote in my notes, so many plot holes, I could drive a truck through this film.
Yeah, he spends 12 years in the Arctic in his Fortress of Solitude.
But there's things here, Steve, like he throws a crystal to make the Fortress of Solitude. It grows up around him. Yeah. He just kind of acts like, yup.
Because that crystal is a piece of Krypton.
Right, but how would he know to throw it?
He just feels it.
Stop it. This part of the movie to me was so ridiculous. When he emerges, he's Clark Kent, and then kind of talk about what happens in the next piece.
Yeah, so when it goes through the voiceover of telling him all this stuff, basically tutoring him on everything of Krypton, right?
And not to interfere with Earth.
Right, not to interfere with Earth, that he's going to be more powerful than everyone, things like that. And so the next time we see him in Metropolis as Clark Kent, and now he's Christopher Reeves.
Yeah.
Right? And he shows up looking for a job at the Daily Planet as a reporter.
Enormous glasses.
All right, I'm going to tell you something. This may be a real harsh take.
Okay.
Christopher Reeves is by far my favorite Superman.
Okay.
I think he embodies Superman. He looks like Superman. Maybe that's because he was the Superman of my childhood. I don't know. But he looks like Superman, and I think he embodies that whole goody two-shoes kind of attitude.
Yeah.
I do not like his Clark Kent portrayal. He's fumbly, and it's almost like he's going too hard the opposite direction.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too much into this because I looked up some stuff about Lois and Clark, which, as I said, we're going to talk about next time. I will say this. I don't think that his portrayal of Clark, here's the problem. He has no sexual chemistry with Margot Kidder at all.
No, not at all.
Now, he does as Superman.
Oh, yeah, because he's super confident.
But he doesn't as Clark Kent. And if you watch most of the other things, Lois and Clark, and then kind of following that, because this kind of ended in the 80s, and then that picked up in the 90s, right?
100%.
If you watch those things, they always have them have sexual chemistry or chemistry in both. Here, to me, they barely interact. Like, he comes off as a doofus who can't do anything. A little bit. And she's just, like, so it's surprising to me when I read about the casting that they wanted her to be kind of, like, clumsy and like, doe-eyed, because I don't see that with her.
I don't either. She's very... confident. She's very take charge, which I like that. Lois Lane is supposed to be
and
that
she
way.
wasn't too much. She wasn't like a hard as nails reporter, like, get out of my way. It's just that he's there and, like, it's not even that he's friend zoned. It's like he doesn't even try as Clark Kent. He doesn't even try to, like, even be best friends with her. I don't know. I found it very odd.
Yeah, he's always like, Lois, and he just seems like he's really, really taking a back seat.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's to like, sell it, that he's, hiding, that he's Superman. But, yeah, I don't care as much for his Clark Kent portrayal. He's actually, like, slouching a bit, even when he's standing.
Well, that part is because he's, like, 6'4".
He's 6'4", yeah.
Jimmy, we also meet. And he's being paid $40 a week, we find out. And I looked this up, and it would be about $9,400 a year in today's dollars.
Wow. So he's basically an intern.
Yeah, he's supposed to be more like an intern, taking pictures and stuff. They also, I will say what was surprising to me about this, and again, we'll compare it to the show later, but the look of this, it's very washed out.
Yes.
Everything is white, gray, tan, and really pastels. Light blue, light pink. So that when you have Superman come in, he is even more
vibrant.
Because the red, the yellow, the blue, like, it really stands out. So that was, to me, kind of visually really some nice choices there, I thought. And also kind of shows, I mean, it's Metropolis, but it's New York City.
And that was my only issue with it. I mean, it's Metropolis, and they say that a number of times, but they make too many shots of New York City.
I mean, yeah, they're in Union Station. Right. They're under the subway. They show shots of the subway, and we fly around the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, there's no way the Statue of Liberty is also in Metropolis, right?
But then here's the thing. Later on, Jimmy Olsen is taking pictures at the Hoover Dam, and Lex Luthor is trying to kill off the West Coast. Yeah. Which I don't understand at all.
I know. Again. Well, Metropolis is supposed to be more inner, like, somewhere, a city Midwestern, because it's not far from Smallville in the comics and in a lot of the lore. So they really were pushing things. Not to mention, when they fire the missiles later in the movies we'll get to, they go one way and the other.
Well, we'll talk about why that is. So first we've got this whole thing where Clark comes, he's the new reporter on staff, and then basically he's trying to not show his true identity, right? Yes. And then we have a problem with the Daily Planet newscopter. Yep. And Lois has, in my notes, a ridiculous hat.
Yeah, and she changed.
Yeah, she changed into a ridiculous hat.
To get on the newscopter at night.
And so then he kind of has to very quickly change to be in Superman mode to save her. Yep. We also have a bit where we see it's underneath, and again, they talk about Park Avenue. So it's very clearly New York City, but not. But we have Lex Luthor, who I put, has a girlfriend who looks like she's 60. She's not, by the way. I did look up all the people's ages. No. But I don't know, just like I guess because she's got like kind of gauche makeup on. I don't know.
Valerie Perrine.
Yeah.
Right? Who plays Eve Teschmacher?
Yeah.
Miss Teschmacher.
Now, I will say she was born, I think, 43. Jimmy was born in 57. Christopher Reeves was born in 52. Margot Kidder was born in 48. Gene Hackman was born in 1930. So there's a huge difference between Gene Hackman and Christopher Reeve. Yes. And it's interesting because other versions have them about the same age or Lex Luthor a little bit older. Right. Was it that way in the comics?
The comics, it always felt like Luthor was older than him. Yeah. But again, it depends on who's writing the comics. And again, it's gone through phases like the shows have. Of they're the same age, they've known each other. You know, there's a lot of different aspects that come about that way. But the thing is that Lex Luthor famously is bald. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that can kind of give you, like, a quasi-ageless feel.
Yeah.
Because you can be a bald young man or a bald older man.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is Gene Hackman has that same thing. Like you just said, Gene Hackman was obviously 48 at this time.
Yeah.
But he could have looked in his 30s or his 50s.
And part of that...
Gene Hackman always looks the same.
That's true. He does. He has one of those faces.
Yeah.
Where it's like, who's the guy who was in Back to the Future?
Oh, they play Doc Brown. Yeah. Christopher Lloyd.
Christopher Lloyd can look like 40 or 80. We don't know.
Yeah.
Right? The other thing that I found... So this piece... I really liked how they did the layer. I thought it was cool that he's basically underground, kind of in an old subway station, that he's turned into this layer. I thought the filming of that was cool. I liked the set design, especially the pool that we see later. I also thought that was hilarious is that he has a collection of wigs.
Yes.
And every scene, he has a different wig on.
Yeah.
Including the scene where he's in the pool where he's wearing the bathing cap.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't see the bald head until the end of the film, which I thought that was really fun.
That was interesting, yeah. And of course, Gene Hackman is a phenomenal actor.
Yeah, and
right?
Ned Beatty is great, too.
I was just going to say, Ned Beatty's almost wasted as the stooge.
Yeah, he's like the henchman who's kind of bumbling and that kind of thing. What'd you think, though, of the piece? The helicopter and she falls out and he changes and
it was great because of course so his first rescue is Superman and Metropolis is Lois Lane, right? And so he saves her, he saves the helicopter, everyone's watching and it's a big spectacle, so it's kind of like his entrance into being Superman. And it's just excellent. And of course he doesn't have the name yet, so she says, who, what's your name? And she says, who are you? And he just says, a friend. Right.
But when he first catches her, he says, I've gotcha. And she says, you've got me. Who's got you? And she looks around and stuff. And I thought that was a funny piece. So they tried to inject, again, they have humorous banter between them, but only when he's Superman.
Yes.
If they had kind of had that same, I think it would have worked a little bit better.
Yes.
We also haven't talked about the score, which is John Williams.
John Williams. I mean, you can't beat it.
No, I just saw John Williams in concert. He, in the summer, conducts his own music, and they had like a whole tribute night to him.
Yes.
And this was one of the pieces that they played. And what I was thinking is, too, it's at certain points, it's almost like a John Philip Sousa march. Mm-hmm. Like, so you do get a very American feel from it, which I thought was interesting, like kind of thinking about the score, like while it's playing. But the music in this makes the movie like takes it to a different level, I think. I don't think it would be as good of a watchable experience if you didn't have that score.
No, the movie, all of John Williams' movies or music pushes his movies open over the top, right? It's just one of those things that he's an amazing composer.
So then after this, while the music is playing, we have kind of a montage of him, as Steve said before, doing Superman things.
It's like, hey, here's Superman.
Yeah.
And it's him saving people, right? Stopping crimes, saves a cat from a tree. We got to talk about that.
Yeah, so it's like, as Steve said, there's thieves on a boat. There's a guy climbing up a wall to do thievery, right? And they have that, like, is that a big blue bird? Kind of like, it's a bird, It's a plane. Kind of a hint to that without saying the line fully, which I liked. But then he saves the... here's your cat back. And she goes inside. And then what happens, Steve?
He flies away.
Yeah.
And you hear the mom, and she comes in and says, Mommy, Kitty was up in a tree, and this man flew in and got her out for me and gave her to me.
Yeah.
And she goes, you know what I've told you about lying? And then you hear her smack the kid.
Yeah.
So Superman just got this girl beat.
What's surprising to me is that it's a line, it's basically happening off screen, right?
Yes.
And it is... I've told you before not to tell lies, or you've heard me tell you about lying, and then it's like very audible smack.
Yeah.
And then we just go to the next scene.
Was she spanked? It sounded like she was popped in the face. It
sounds like she was slapped. And I really, if they were going to keep that in, I would have liked him to turn back and talk to the mom.
Yeah.
Even if and have it maybe happen like... you don't want it to happen on screen because you don't
Right.
want the kid be slapped. But I think that if you had, I mean, he's fighting for truth, justice, the American way. And I don't know, it was a weird line to keep in there.
That was the American way back then.
I don't like it. I don't like that at all. Then there's like little quips. It flies. Look, Mon, no wires. Caped wonder. Yeah. Oh, those are the headlines for the papers.
Yeah.
Because we're back in with now we're back to the news organization.
Right. So the next phase of the movie goes into him having his interview with Lois Lane. Right? She interviews him on the rooftop of her building. She has like a rooftop garden.
And she's wearing like in between a dress and a negligee.
Yeah, she definitely was dressing for the occasion. And they have, to be, again, like you said, there's no chemistry, especially between her and Clark. But there's chemistry in this scene.
Yeah,
with him as Superman and her as Lois. And there's some innuendo. Sometimes it's not even innuendo.
No, she offers him a drink and he goes, "No thanks, I don't drink when I'm flying," which I thought was hilarious.
Yes.
Then she asks, the first question is, "Are you married or do you have a girlfriend?"
Yeah.
Then she talks about how he can see through things.
Right.
And she says, "What color underwear am I wearing?"
Yeah, inviting him to take a look.
And he's like, "I don't know, there's a lead planter."
Yeah, he's like, "I can't tell." She's like, "Oh, you can't really do that?" And he's like, "No, but the planter you're standing in front of is lead and I can't see through lead."
Yeah, and she moves and then he goes, "Pig."
Yeah, they continue. It's great because they continue to have a conversation, and like 2 or 3 minutes later, she walks away from the planter, and in the middle of another sentence, he goes pink. And then she takes her a minute to catch on to what he's saying, and then she blushes.
Yeah. Then they fly around New York City together, which is...
Before that, she blushes, and then they continue talking, and she's like, "How tall are you?" And he's like, 6'4". And it's just this little thing. And in the middle of these questions like, "How strong are you? How fast are you?" Things like that, she goes, "Do you like pink?"
Oh, I missed it.
About her under, and he goes, "I like pink very much." It was some hard... I don't even know if you call that flirting. It was... Yeah.
So, they do very heavy flirting.
Yeah.
Then he takes her for a flight around what is definitely New York City because we loop around the Statue of Liberty. I want to say I was really impressed. Not horrible effects. They still hold up today, I think. Yeah. And also, think about what it took because this is before drones and stuff.
Oh, 100%.
So they had to have like a crane with a camera on it
or a
to
helicopter.
do like these swooping shots and stuff. And what is, in my opinion, the worst part of the movie. And we have been talking about this, you guys, ever since then. Because Lois says, "Can you read my mind?" And her mouth is shut. Okay.
Yeah, so she's thinking these things.
We're hearing her inner thoughts, and she starts talking in rhyme and writing poetry.
She starts saying poetry about him, and it's not good
It's not
for a journalist.
It's not good for a 7th grader.
Luckily, he cannot read your mind.
I'm really glad he can't because it was things like, "And near his cape, I feel like an ape." I mean, it's not that bad, but it was pretty bad, you guys.
Yeah, it was.
So horrible. And it is like love-struck 13-year-old bad poetry.
Yep.
Not good at all. Then we're back and we've got Clark. I put Clark as such a dork.
Yeah. And it's as he leaves there that she comes up with the name Superman for him.
Yeah, but she's also gotten some details that she should not have published that are going to come up later on.
Yes.
Including the fact that he can't see through lead.
Yeah, and he's from Krypton.
And that her underwear are pink. I don't know why you'd print that in a paper. No, I'm just kidding. So, we've got coming up next then this piece where Lex talks on a special frequency.
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, the dogs are going crazy."
Yeah, the dogs are going crazy.
Only the dogs and you can hear what I'm saying right now.
During the other pieces we've talked about, him saving people, him with Lois, there's been little cuts to Luthor, and it's shown him like stealing a nuclear weapon, or not stealing nuclear weapons, but he's tampered with nuclear weapons. Like he pretended to set up a car accident to get an army truck to stop so they could tamper with a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
So it's been laying the groundwork, but you really haven't seen what his whole plan is.
Yeah, and so now basically he tells him the whole plan because that's what evil henchmen do in this type of a movie, right?
He lures him to his lair.
Yeah.
And tells him the whole plan because Lex, who really, Lex Luthor has no powers. And Gene Hackman plays this excellent because Luthor's power is his intelligence.
Yeah.
Luthor he's also rich, but so is Batman. Right? He's obviously super rich, but also he's very smart.
Yeah.
And he's always been an equal to Superman because Superman is super strong and powerful, but Lex is a strategist. Right? And he's telling Superman the whole plan because Lex knows he's got Superman.
Yeah.
He knows that he's got kryptonite in a lead box.
And this is the kind of thing that is repeated a lot in other movies and shows that, like, you have somebody who has the brawn and somebody else who has the brains and they go up against each other. Yeah. Right? Like Glass, the movie Glass, where you have, like, the Bruce Willis character who's, like, unbreakable. And
right.
You have the other guy whose bones are, like, very brittle. Right? But his plan is to set off nuclear weapons along the San Andreas Fault.
Yeah.
Causing San Francisco and San Diego to fall into the ocean.
Yeah.
So that he can then rebuild the cities, but there's not going to be any people.
Well, he's not going to what happened is he bought a bunch of land in mid-California. Yeah. So once those cities fall into the ocean, his land is now oceanfront property.
Right, but then he'll basically rebuild.
He's going to build new cities.
Owning all the land. And
it's actually a good plan.
The worst plan I've ever heard of. That so at any rate, so he lays out his plan, but he does it with this huge map, which I just found really funny. Like you could just say the plan, but no, like we're gonna show you on the map.
It's on the floor. The whole floor is painted like a
Yeah,
map.
the whole floor is painted like a map, and then he's pointing to different parts of it. Then we have this thing where he realizes that Ned Beatty, his right-hand man, has misset the missile. So instead of both of them going into California, one's headed to Hoboken.
Yeah, New Jersey.
And he's weakened Superman with the kryptonite.
Yep. And again, this is what makes Lex Luthor different as a villain. Most villains, as we said before, they do all this narration, and then the superhero's like, good, then I can stop you.
Yeah.
The thing we don't realize until this point, once he tricks Superman into the kryptonite by pretending that it's like a button to stop it and getting him to open it. But then also, Luthor didn't start narrating to him till after he'd already launched the missiles.
Yeah.
His plan was already happening.
So he has no time.
Exactly.
But also, again, plot holes. How did he know what kryptonite was? He knew that he was from Krypton, but people on Earth don't know where that is. How did he get the kryptonite?
There was a scene where he was in his library looking up when meteors fell, and he tried to line it up. So they were showing that he was researching that.
I guess, but it's a stretch. For me, it's a stretch anyway. So, here's the problem. Lex Luthor's old-looking girlfriend.
Miss Tessmacher.
Who's been smoking too much and has wrinkly skin.
Yeah.
She has a mom who lives in Hoboken.
Yeah.
And Lex shrugs and walks away.
Yeah, she says, Lex, my mom lives in Hoboken. And he looks her dead cold in the eyes and just shakes his head no, like, not anymore. And just continues walking away. So
it shows you really what kind of a person he is. And then we have basically... She has to decide whether or not to help Superman, and she makes the decision to help him, so he's underwater chained with the krypton.
Yeah.
And she helps him, but she makes him promise to take care of the Hoboken one first.
Yeah, he has to stop the missile. He has to save her mom first.
Which is difficult, Steve, because he didn't know that Jimmy and Lois, for no reason whatsoever, are out at the Hoover Dam taking pictures of nothing.
Again, there was a reason. Lois was sent to investigate some unknown person had bought up all this land, which was Luthor. right? So
I
she's
get why they're
following-
sent there. What I'm saying is Jimmy is taking pictures just of the Hoover Dam.
Yeah, I feel like Jimmy was just sent on an errand. It was like, go take some pictures of the Hoover Dam.
He's only being paid $40 a week. They got to give him some benefits.
Do you think they're
here?
even giving him like travel funds?
No. No. No, he's got to pay for that somehow. Maybe
Out of his $40.
Out of his $40.
So
taking the train.
He's actually probably paying to do this job.
Yeah. So what happens when the missiles launch?
So the missile launch, they're heading to both sides, right? Superman does, as you said, Miss Tessmacher saves him. Although before she takes the kryptonite off, she kisses him.
Yeah, which is sexual assault.
Yeah, because he can't. He's like almost unconscious.
Yeah.
And then she pulls it off of him, and he says, "Why did you kiss me before taking it off?" And she goes, "Because I didn't think you'd let me after."
Yeah, I don't like that.
And I'm like, that means that you definitely knew he probably wasn't going to consent to that.
And then she says something like, "Why do I always go after the wrong men?" And we're like, "I don't know, just make better choices, lady." Like, you can have a different boyfriend.
Yeah.
You do look old, but you're not bad looking.
You thought a good boyfriend was evil maniacal mastermind who lived in a sewer condo.
Yeah, 40 feet under the city.
Yeah.
And he says also about that, he goes, "Think about what all those suckers are paying for up on Park Slope 40 feet above us."
Yeah.
He's got prime real estate.
So Superman takes off to stop them. He goes and he does stop the missile that's about to hit Hoboken, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. But he is not able to stop the one that hits California.
No.
And it does set off the fault line. So Superman shoots himself into the crust of the earth and stops the earthquake from being even bigger than it would have been.
But for some people, it's too late.
It's too late because Lois is in a car whose engine dies because she's out of gas.
Yeah.
And she ends up, a fault line crack opens and actually swallows her whole and fills her car with dirt.
This, I had a hard time watching because I have a recurring nightmare of being in a car and like going over a bridge and into water and being submerged or being buried alive in my car, and I'm driving from the back seat and I can't reach the pedals or stop.
There's a lot to unpack there.
I guess. But listen, this is like they do it in it's filmed in a very tense way.
Yeah, if you're claustrophobic, it's not a good scene.
No. So then what happens, Steve? What
So
does
he
do?
gets there too late.
Yep.
And decide, he screams no, and it's like, oh, Lois is dead. That was a choice. Like, they really went different. So then he decides, he keeps hearing his dad's voice saying, don't interfere with human history. But instead, he goes out to space, and he flies the opposite direction of the Earth's spin to stop it, and then get it to spin backwards.
Yeah.
Which apparently, in Superman physics, means time goes backwards.
Also in Star Trek.
Okay.
Yeah, and so here was my last fun fact. This was supposed to be at the end of the second movie.
Oh,
and they were going to have a cliffhanger at the end of the first movie. But Warner Brothers, because they had to give them so much money, they were like, you cannot have a cliffhanger at the end of this movie.
You got to wrap this up.
And you also, they didn't want them also, which had been done in like the Superman shorts and stuff, where they like retconned it. Like Superman would die and then the next one would come and they would be like, oh no, he made it actually. And like that kind of thing. So instead they took this footage that they had done for the end of the second movie and instead put it in this film.
Yeah.
Which I think was a good choice, actually.
It was. So he spins the Earth back just a couple minutes, and he's able to this time get there in time to save her in her car.
Yeah.
And then also he saves Jimmy, but he leaves them both in the middle of the desert.
And also, just go a couple more minutes and have...
Just stop the missile.
Of you and stop the missile. Because now we have nuclear fallout.
Megan,
in the
we're
middle
not
of
Superman.
California.
We don't understand how time physics and spinning the Earth backwards works.
Maybe it's like the time turner that Hermione has, and you
Maybe
can
it's
only go so many
minutes.
times.
You don't know that. So, but yeah, it's good. And then, of course, he goes, I've got another job to do. And he flies off, leaving Lois and Jimmy next to the dead car in the middle of Death Valley.
Yeah, and also, people are going to be kind of concerned with, like, you know, the nuclear
Yes,
from the missile. So he returns And takes Lex Luthor.
He goes and gets Lex Luthor in Lex's henchmen, and he brings them to prison.
And tells the warden, hey, I've got something for you. And the warden's like, wow, Superman, thanks. And he's like, don't worry, you do your part too. And Steve's like, not really.
Not really. Your part's watching these criminals. Superman just literally turned back time.
But he says, I'm bringing them to you so that they can be found guilty in a fair trial.
Yeah.
Because unlike
he says
Batman...
you can hold on to them until they... Yeah.
Unlike Batman, he's not a vigilante.
Exactly.
He's helping the police.
Right.
Bring in criminals who just started a nuclear war on their own country.
Yeah.
They're terrorists, basically.
That's true.
So, let's talk about reception. How was it received at the time?
Well, first off, let's talk about box office reception.
Okay. Superman
set a new all-time U.S. industry record.
Oh.
For a pre-Christmas week with $12 million.
That's specific, but okay.
And it set records for Warner Brothers. So they definitely got their worth of giving some money to them.
Well, and then they had 3 more.
Yeah.
Right? So
their best opening day at $2.8 million. And then they continued to make more. They had an 18-day gross of $43 million, which in 78 is a lot of money, right? It ended up, including re-releases, it went on to gross $134 million in the U.S. And $166 million international. So it totaled $300 million, which in 78 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, Superman received many positive reviews. Rotten Tomato, it's both has a high review, both critics and audience. Okay. It's like 94%, 87%.
It's like an A minus.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, you've seen some Rotten Tomatoes scores.
Yeah,
right?
And sometimes they're like really far apart, but that's pretty close together.
Yeah, the website's critical consensus says Superman deftly blends humor and gravitas, taking advantage of the perfectly cast Reeve to craft a loving, nostalgic tribute to an American pop culture icon. Metacritic gave it an 81 out of 100, which is really good. Even Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the creators, gave it a positive review.
Oh, that
they gave it a positive reaction.
Yeah.
It said Shuster was delighted to see Superman on the screen. He said Chris Reeve has just the right touch of humor. He really is Superman.
Oh, that's good.
Roger Ebert gave the film 4 out of 4 stars.
Well, that's surprising because Roger Ebert...
He's a tough critic.
Historically on the show, he hasn't liked anything.
Although he described the Krypton scenes as ponderous. Which I'm not far off with him.
I think I agree with him on that one. Okay.
He said Brando was allegedly paid $3 million for this role, because he didn't know, of course.
Yeah.
He said, or judging by his dialogue, $500,000 a cliche.
That's brilliant. Brilliant.
So, yeah, it was really well received from the critics as well as, obviously, the box office.
Yeah. And how did we feel about it watching it back? For you, did this hold up?
Yeah, I think so. I really did like it. There were some spots, like I said, that were a little bit dated, I think. But I like Christopher Reeve as Superman. I really do. Margot Kidder, I think, played a good role. It's got a great all-star cast to it. And I feel like, I feel like, did it ruin my childhood or does it hold up? It holds up.
You know what was one of the interesting things is you're saying like some of the things are kind of dated. Like he goes to change in a phone booth and it's a half a phone booth and he's got to find a full one.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I noticed, there are only like 2 people of color in this whole movie. And one of them has a line like, hey, that guy just changed so fast. And another one is just a background person. And it was... To me, that's one of the things that stuck out to me. I don't, because today we're just so used to seeing like colorblind casting and really diverse casts. And so it was almost like weird.
Yeah, interesting. By Superman 3, Richard Pryor stars in that film.
So we'll have to watch that sometime. But, and we just, on our own, we watched another Richard Pryor movie, which was great. But yeah, I think that, there are some special effects that work. There are some that are a little outdated. The only thing, I think, yes, the parts on Krypton, the parts in Kansas could have been shortened up maybe a little bit. I didn't think they were actually in Kansas too long. I do think they're maybe on Krypton too long. They could have moved some of that to the second film. But I also thought I just wanted to see more chemistry between Clark Kent and Lois. And maybe that comes later. We see her building a relationship with Superman. We don't see her building a relationship with Clark Kent.
Yeah, even a working relationship where they're partners.
They're kind of just together in a couple scenes. He says something about her writing a story. She's typing by herself in like a really large room where everybody's typing back when like newspapers mattered.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the only piece that was kind of missing for me. They had a couple of the montages kind of went on for too long. Again, they could have trimmed it. They could have trimmed this movie by 20 minutes, and I think it would have been better.
Okay.
But, yeah, it holds up. For me, it holds up.
Out of 10 capes.
Well, we're doing out of lunchboxes still. Because you picked lunchboxes initially. Because we have Lunchables.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay.
So I guess we can
do capes next time.
No. So out of lunchboxes.
Yeah.
How many lunchboxes do you give Superman out of 10?
I feel like I'm kind of between a 7 and an 8. I guess I would go with an 8 on this. I think it's pretty good. I think if we had kids and we showed this to them, like if they were like around 8, 10, I think they'd still like it.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe the shorter edited version, but I think they'd enjoy it. It holds up. It's a fun movie to watch. I'm not going to watch it again. It's not like, I don't feel like this about how I felt like Who Framed Roger Rabbit got a 10. Princess Bride, I think, got a 10 for me. So it's not quite that high, but it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would give it an 8 as well.
I'd watch part 2. That's kind of my tipping point.
Part 2 is awesome.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
Yeah. So I would give it an 8 as well. I think it was really well done. I really liked it, but there is a few things. I thought it was long in a few spots, and there was a few things I think that were dated or didn't hold up as much. But so definitely an 8, which is really solid.
Also, Christopher Reeve is a tall drink of water, and I would watch anything with him.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah! 8 out of 10 lunchboxes. 8 out of 10 lunchboxes for our show, and 4 out of 5 for our snack.
That's good.
That's a pretty good week.
Yeah.
So next time we are going to be looking at
Lois and Clark.
And
since we just did Superman, we might as well look at from my end, I liked Lois and Clark. And so we get to see something that was from a little bit later during our childhood.
Yeah, into our teenage years, into the 90s. And now we come to my favorite part of the show. What is Steve willing to watch? All right, so I picked the pilot because I think we're going to get maybe some of that backstory, origin stuff, and the setup for what we're going to be seeing.
Yep.
Right? I think that's kind of important. So sometimes I give you like 5 or 6 episodes.
Okay.
I kind of have, you get a choice between 2 here.
All right.
So I lied because one of these looks really fun. No, just 2. Okay. So basically, we'll talk about this more next time, but in this show, we have huge changes between season 1 and season 2. They basically like retooled a lot of it.
Okay.
And recast people and things like that. So one of these is the end of season 2, and it's called And the Answer Is... Superman's real identity is in danger of being exposed by a diary written by a man from the future.
Oh.
Or season 3, episode 1, which basically picks up from the cliffhanger in season 2.
Okay.
We have a lot to talk about. Lois and Clark's relationship comes to a turning point after she reveals what she knows.
I think we got to do that one.
Okay, so we'll watch season 1 with the setup of their relationship and him working at the paper.
Yep.
And then we'll jump into season 3 where presumably they're together.
So we'll watch...
Or about to get together.
We'll watch season 1, episode 1, and then season 3, episode 1.
Yep.
I like that.
And I will say this too, we kind of have decided that a lot of times we might only be able to watch one episode of something. Yeah. But I think here, because of all the changes, I think it would be good for us to cover 2 things.
Definitely.
Because there's such a big shift. So that's what's coming. We hope to have that episode up for you guys in possibly next week, possibly the week after. So like I said last time, we don't know if we'll be doing this maybe every other week is maybe our plan. And if we can get more out, we will. But that's kind of the game plan right now.
Yep.
So until then, my name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
Thank you guys so much for listening. And if you're not subscribed, be sure to subscribe. Leave us a like. Leave us a message. You can find us still on StopRuiningMyChildhoodPodcast.com or on 5050pressandmedia.com.
Yep.
So
leave us a comment or a message, even if it's just like, Steve, we're so glad Megan let you guys come back.
And I'm not on Facebook anymore, but Steve will be able to see those messages.
Yes.
So that's it for us, guys. Have a great week.